So, welcome to our podcast of What Makes a Difference. And we're today going to be talking around about three different topics that we've already been talking about and kind of joining them all up together in a roundabout way.
Yeah. So we started off where we're talking about the previous episodes we did that on the paradox of when you start to have that separation from your previous circle and then you're revisiting. So that's like when you go home and leave.
Yeah.
And you don't quite fit.
And there was that them and us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about or us against them, or them coming to help us, however we want to term and phrase that, and how we identify with different groups and different parties.
Yeah.
And as well, which goes quite nicely into parts, ego states, or resources, doesn't it?
It does. I'm going to kind of caveat that with sometimes what we're talking about is that point where some of the common phrases that maybe some I've used, some I've heard being used are, I just don't feel like myself anymore.
Yeah. Or I feel like a new man or woman this morning, depending on sex, gender, whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And one that's applicable to you.
Mm-hmm. Or it could be,
I'm beside myself.
I'm beside myself, or I don't recognize myself.
Yeah.
Or
and you have
I don't recognize you.
Yeah. Or you have other people giving affirmation of you've changed.
Mm-hmm.
So we've mentioned this before. So, and that can be the people taking mick out or having a joke alongside you because you may have got a promotion at work or taken on some extra things, or they don't recognize that person you are anymore because you've left that circle, that path behind and gone, this no longer serves me anymore. I want to have this new way of being.
I think sometimes that's about the pathways we take as well, because if you think about it, at any given time, we are the sum of our learnings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we are operating in the same environments as the people we're spending a lot of time with, then that's a bit easier because each of us are exposed to similar experiences. Our outcomes from that will be different because we all make our own judgments, our own decisions.
Yep.
We all experience things in a unique way.
Mm.
But we're likely to have more points of comparison.
Well, talking of pathways, I was watching this video this morning, and there was this doctor, excuse me, and this doctor generally eats a very healthy, well-balanced diet. So they did an MRI scan of his brain, and they took all the neural pathways of how his brain was functioning when he's really digested all this food and what lights up and all the neural pathways and all that sort of stuff. So he decided for a period of time to eat highly processed food. That then connected different pathways of basically the whole outcome was you got the brain now of a addict of X, Y, and Z because of all these new connections looking for that endorphin, looking for all those bits and pieces that deal with addiction.
In a way, those pathways are also, you could argue, present for our belief structures. So depending on what we're exposed to, depending on what we read, what we listen to, what we experience, we make decisions about that. We make beliefs about that. And that then colours our outlook on life.
I'd say we form ideas first before beliefs, don't we?
Yeah, ideas, concepts. It's almost like we build a framework and then we have to decide how we feel about that framework.
Mm-hmm.
What our response is going to be to that framework.
And does it suit the narrative that we're listening to as well? And if we're going down that route of then listening to a certain narrative all the time, that leaves the them and us paradox, doesn't it?
I suppose that enforces it.
Yeah, it reinforces it, I should say.
And I'm just wondering if I bring in my recent social media experiences, because my social media feed's still in recovery phase just now. It might take a while.
What are you recovering from?
Well, it's that one where you and I were talking about doing a podcast on social media and the impact of social media and some of the extreme views that you get in social media. And so, because I'm a bit of a research fiend,
yes,
yeah, I had a bit of an immersive experience in all of the extremist views and angles. A lot of them were gender based. And that's what my social media is going to take a long while to recover from, because my feed now is being,
the logarithm is
the algorithms are not doing very much for my mental health, that's for sure.
No.
But what's quite scary is how fast the algorithms changed. How fast my feeds and my suggested content morphed, so that overnight all I was getting were these polar opposing views, which were really quite extreme, and I wasn't getting very much else.
Yeah.
If we look at patterns,
you're going back to then watching cats and laser pens.
Well, yeah, I'm going to have to spend like 3 days watching baby pandas rolling about in leaves and, see if I can reset it that way.
But there'll be that residual hanging on, won't there? Because the logarithm will still remember and drip feed that into you.
Yeah, to see if I pick that up, to see if that's still a potential area of interest for me. And it's almost going to be waiting for my point of engagement with it to see whether or not it feeds me more of the same. I mean, literally what we're talking about is clickbait. But if you have a viewpoint, it's pattern matching again, isn't it? And how our brain operates to validate our experience.
Well, that's what the brain's all about, isn't it? Well, that's what it's about, isn't it? Matching patterns for a predictive outcome.
Well,
so the easier we can predict outcome, the easier, or I guess the better or the easier our lives will be, because we kind of tend to guess then what's coming ahead. If we're going to match a pattern, we can predict what's happened previously to then go on, that's what's happened in the past, this is what's going to happen in the future. So it's kind of like firefighters. The more experienced ones will know, right, we don't enter this building because of these signs. We know the floor's going to collapse, but we would enter because of these signs, because we know the floor's going to be stable and the structure of the building is going to be more integral rather than the other way. I know that's more extreme kind of things, but that's what we look for, isn't it? Those matching patterns that can hopefully predict a future.
We do, but I think there's a step beyond that, which comes down to, I suppose, and we've mentioned it before almost, that while our brains are hugely complex, they're also incredibly simplistic. And there's an element of our brain we all have, which is like the ultimate golden retriever, in that its sole aim is to please and to feed us what it thinks we want to see, to validate our thoughts, our opinions. It looks to prove that that's the case. It's the ultimate, in a way, it's what the algorithms are based on, really, isn't it?
Is that the reticular activating system?
Yeah, It is the reticular activating system, but it's also about pattern matching, because in a way that algorithm doesn't recognize the impact. It just says, oh, this is what you want. So it thinks it's giving us what we want, regardless of the impact on our emotional well-being.
Yeah, so what you can do with this, if you want to give it a go, is look specifically for blue cars or people riding bicycles and see what you notice from when you weren't looking out for them to when you are looking out for it now.
Yeah. Or maybe pick a brand of car. Have a look at some pictures of that brand and then see how much you notice.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, go and do a search and have a look at the latest model of the Tesla, or look at what Teslas look like, and then see how many there are on the roads. You probably suddenly realise there's a hell of a lot more than you thought there was.
And I wonder where else people can use that in their lives. So,
but isn't this about choosing wisely?
Choosing better.
Yeah, because if we're working on pattern matching, then it's almost kind of like, what's the pattern that I am telling my brain to match? Is it that I hate myself, my body, my body's disgusting, my personality's awful, I'm going to be lonely for the rest of my life, I'm a failure, blah, blah, blah? Or is it the positive messages that we're choosing? The fact that we're reprogramming our brain to seek affirmations of a positive nature.
Yeah. So that goes along with then a bit of discussion about pronouns, doesn't it?
Yeah. Because language is powerful.
It is, yeah. Because people talk about pronouns. And so, for argument's sake, when you know you do this, so somebody's projecting something onto you, which they actually do. So instead of saying, when you do this, ask them, do you mean you or me? Is that you or I that's doing this action? They go, oh, when I do this, it's X, Y, and Z. So people pass on that pronoun to somebody else when it's actually a reflection of what they're doing.
Yeah, it's almost like we make assessments based on our patterns, not theirs, because we don't stop to really find out about their patterns. Yes. It's a bit like when you and I are working together. And
yes, that's right. I just said we work together.
Yeah, we do. And like anything else, there are times when that works really well, and there are times when that's kind of like not so well. But you and I have learned how to address that, and we've given each other permission to address that. And I think that's really powerful, because that means that both you and I have a pattern to go, I'm observing this. Are you seeing this too? And what that does is it means that we both get to acknowledge something without attaching it to either one of us. It doesn't become a blame. It just goes, yeah, And then it's almost like we take the issue and we place it in the room. And then we both get to have a look at it and going, what's causing that? Rather than it having a major confrontation or debate. There's no fault, there's no blame.
No.
Those pronouns sometimes and how we structure them in a sentence. I think you probably thought we should go with this, didn't you? The pronouns and how we structure that in a sentence.
That could portion blame.
It apportions blame. It projects blame and ownership.
Yep. So somebody could be saying to someone else is, when you do this, it makes me feel uncomfortable. So that's a portion blame for that person for how that person is responding to what's being said or done towards them, rather than taking that responsibility of I'm not feeling happy or comfortable with what's going on in the moment.
Well, you look at the language you and I use now, where literally one of us or other of us will occasionally say, there's a bit of spikiness in the room just now, isn't it? Or is that just me that's noticing that? Are you seeing that too? And the way we structure that phrase puts that in the centre of the room, but it doesn't attach it to you or me. And that way either of us have the scope to go, I wasn't aware of that. What's leading to that? What evidence is there that's making you think that?
Yeah. So we can take with this then goes different perspectives. So we have the first perspective, which is our own. I'm never really too sure about how to describe the second person perspective. And then there's a third person, which could be like an eagle eye view, or perhaps scope and observing what the interaction between yourself and the other person is going on.
It's almost like it becomes that third person's perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah. So if I remember rightly, the second person perspective would is, for example, you're at a wedding and you're observing the proceeds going on, but you're like the wedding cake.
You're the wedding cake? Okay, you're going to have to tell me more about that, right?
Yeah, so this won't go with it.
But I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's how that wedding cake then describe that scene that's going on in front of them.
Can I just ask, and you're really going to hate me for it, is it a sponge? And what sort of icing's on the wedding cake?
Is it sponge? Quite possibly.
Sorry, right, back to the wedding cake.
Definitely layers and layers of marzipan. There's a white fondant? Yeah, with all those little decorations going around it. And then maybe, like those sugar spirals that those chefs do on top, going up the side as well. And
okay, are you indulging me now?
Up on little pillars and stuff with a couple of married people on top.
Okay, back on topic. So,
there's jam.
There's
jam in between sponges as well, like with layers of icing.
Are you borrowing my brain for 5 minutes? Is that what you're doing? Yeah. So you're the wedding cake.
And so that wedding cake is then given that perspective. I think that's a second person perspective, but I could be very wrong on that.
See, now you've made me question that, so I'm going to have to Google it now. A second person point of view or perspective is a narrative perspective that places the emphasis on you. Although the second person point of view is very difficult to sustain, it can be used sparingly. So examples. So the pronouns that would be used in that are you, yours, yours, you, your, yours. So that would be things like you should be proud of yourself. That must be like the royal you. You're the one that you reflect back and go, well, is that you or is that me? You might, but I won't. Because the person's actually talking about themselves. You know when. No, I don't, but you might.
Yes.
There's lots of assumption in that.
There is. It's almost mind reading, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know how you make me feel.
You
know how disappointed I am in you now. Isn't it? That's what, yeah. Those are very loaded questions, or statements, rather.
They are. They're hugely, they're really heavy questions. And I don't mean that. It comes back to the phrasing you just used there is loaded with assumption. They're very heavy in assumption. But it's almost like it's a projection of our identity onto somebody else's. It's a projection of our thinking and our pattern onto someone else's, assuming that it's the same.
And assumptions are?
To be avoided at all costs.
All the mother of all fuck-ups.
The mother of all fuck-ups, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I circle back to that point of identity, it comes back to that I don't know who I am, or I don't.
So were you asking how do I fit in? That sort of thing.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like, is that the question I'm really asking when I say that to myself? When I ask myself, who am I?
Hmm.
And that's a common one that happens to a lot of people when there's significant change in their life.
Especially even long-term career.
Long-term career, long-term relationships, long-term communities. Sometimes all three at once. And that messes with your head big style.
What's that?
When you leave all three at once, community, job, and relationship.
There's a whole lot of grief and mourning going on, bereavement going on in that process.
Mm-hmm.
So possibly in some cases as well, a sense of relief.
Quite often.
You've got all those, you've got a sense of relief mixed with bereavement, grief, loss. It's
uncertainty.
Like, where am I now? You know, feeling relief, but I've also got all this going on. That's a lot to take in.
Was that about anchor points?
Could well be. But it's what, I go back to that conversation we had with Rachel about the childhood bereavement, where the child will yo-yo or pendulum between extremes of fun and joy.
Yeah.
But that real deep sadness as well, which is a healthy state to be in, whereas adults, we tend to go in one or the other and then cross over, but not as pendulate as quick.
I'm quite taken with the idea of anchor points, Rich.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really what our communities are? Is anchor points? Points of reference, maybe? Because, so, map reading.
So we're out in the deep sea.
Right, map reading. In order for you to find out where you are, what do you do? If you have a map of the region, but you don't know where you are within that, how do you find and pinpoint your location?
Well, as long as you've got the correct map for the area, you'd orientate it to the ground. You'd have a compass with you as well to help with all that sort of stuff. But it's all about orientation to the ground with a map to the ground.
Then what do you do?
Well, you look at key points. So you go and find a route. You go, okay, I know using landmarks, whatever. So it could be pylons, it could be forestry blocks, it could be sheep or cows and pigs.
Reference points.
Exactly, reference points that don't.
Although I don't think it's going to be sheep or cows or pigs. No, they're mobile.
Yeah, reference points that don't move.
Did you think you were going to sneak that past and see if I noticed that?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's all the reference points that don't move. So obviously things like hills, you know, the gradients, tree lines, pylons, rivers, roads.
Right. So if we map that across to our sense of identity, so our map and where we are on the map.
That's highly detailed for that context. And then we step out of it.
But our location in it, our sense of presence of where we are, is orientated to reference points that are limited in their movement or change. So you map that across to a job, a relationship, a community. Yeah. This is reference points that help structure our sense of identity.
Yeah. Yeah, so you may have a bit like the silk maps the pilots used to have.
Mm.
So you'd have a very rough outline of, we'd have detailed-ish map, but fairly rough as to where all the locations are and how to escape and get away to it, bits and points. So a new map may be similar to that. Like your silk map, there's a rough outline, a rough sketch of the orientation of the new land you're getting onto, but it's not fully developed just yet. Because you haven't noticed all the other little increments in between. So you may have prominent hills, but you may not have that slightly undulating ground or the small brook that's going through rather than a larger river. And those are like your key waypoints in between to navigate how to get to that other point.
So those waypoints could be us building that community or a new community around about us. If you're drawing a new map, if you're becoming almost like the cartographer and you have only got a rough outline, then you have to fill in that detail bit by bit. You can't do it all at once.
Or it may not be the right map, so you have to screw it up and start again.
There's almost a sense check of the boundaries, isn't it? Is this actually where I am now?
Yeah.
Just in case some numpty in the background's giving you the wrong outline and you're like, that doesn't match the boundaries of the shoreline.
Yeah, so the classic one would be a job description, going in for a job and you go and expecting this. So somebody I know fairly well, he went in for a job, do similar in the field he was beforehand, but it was more of an administrative role. And there's a contractor who's working with him. He said to the boss above him is, you've got this person in the wrong job role. You need him at least 2 pay scales above because 1, he's doing administrative roles that should be for somebody else. And 2, he's got the experience you need to work on all these systems that you've got in place. But obviously, they didn't have any positions open for that.
Or that can work conversely, where you end up in a job role thinking that you're in to do this job, and all of a sudden you find that actually the expectation is vastly different because it's not matching the map you've been given for that.
Yeah.
Because you could use that description, you could map that across to your relationships. If something fundamental changes there, it's almost kind of like your landmarks shift. Your landmarks are no longer static, whether that's a relationship breakup where you find out something about a friend or a partner that you didn't know before that shakes or removes one of those reference points that you thought was there and you still discover it's not. Yeah,
well, the classic one is, as mentioned before, Educating Rita, isn't it? You've read the book or seen the film. So what she started off was a hairdresser in Liverpool. And then she had to go and do a university degree and all that, and then realised the whole world had opened up and people had gone. She made a reference to lectures going, all people do is go to the pub and there's 4 types of lager that taste exactly the same, and that's their highlight for the week. Whereas she'd gone on experiencing, like, even though it was amateur dramatics, was it the Seagull or something? Gone on to go and experience other things rather than the typical Friday night of get home, have a meal and go down the pub.
I remember early on in my HR career, one of my favourite people that I ever worked with that I was fortunate to have as a line manager. And when there was a big change program that we were working on, and their comment to me was, in the team that you will be leading, the one thing I can guarantee is the size and scope of this change is that at least 2 relationships will change. Not all of the people's personal relationships will survive. Some of them will leave the business, some of them will stay, some of them will change their job. And it's exactly because of that, because the size and scope of the change was stretching the boundaries of their map to other areas so that their expectations of life, their experience of life of what was open to them radically changed. At that point, they had a decision to make. Do I stay where I am, or do I explore new territory? And if I explore new territory, are the people around me willing to come with me?
And if your group or organisation would like help with that change, that identity, that communication between groups.
Map reading and cartography?
Yep. Don't get an officer. So, yeah, drop us an email and we'd be happy to help you know scope for what's going on with your organisation, working with you, the organisation, see what areas we could potentially work with you on.
Yeah, because those reference points are important. And when they change, they can cause a huge amount of unrest and unsettlement. But that's where, as you say, we can help. So give us a shout.
Yes, you can email us at admin@whatmakesdifference.org, which will be in the show notes below.
Yeah. And if there's anything on a personal basis that's really intrigued you, that you would like to have a chat with us, then please drop us a note. We're always happy for those conversations. And let us know what you think. Like, follow, and share.
Your takeaways?
I really like that map piece and the reference points. I might be using that lots in conversations I have with people, Rich. I really might, because that makes so much sense to me in terms of that sense of identity. It's the placement, isn't it, within our map, placement within our reference.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like your ship without an anchor, isn't it? When you're bobbing around in the sea, you don't have a reference point.
Yeah, but also there's a certain point where you have to assess what the purpose of that reference point, that anchor actually is.
Well, you could be, so if you've got go back to your map and stuff like that. But in this case, in the sea, you don't have that deep set anchor. You're almost like you're bobbing around in the sea directionless, because the winds and waves will take you wherever that wants to take you, the ocean currents.
Yeah.
But unless you have that anchor, or you have the stars to navigate by, or whatever else it is, or the Vikings used to tell stories of waypoints and all that, of how to get to one point to another one.
Well, I really like that, because what that means is the reference point doesn't have to be static. The reference point can move with us.
You were on about my cows and sheep and pigs and not being able to use them.
Well, no, but you're talking about stars now. So stars, that works for. Stars, that works for. It doesn't work for cows, sheep and pigs, but it works for stars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But also it's that story we get told, or we tell, isn't it? So the Vikings would tell waypoints by stories of, I can't remember now, but it'd be go across here and you'll see this big tall blah, 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 and you go.
Well, isn't it the way we give directions to somebody? It's the way we give directions, isn't it?
Yeah. So the stories and narratives we tell up. One is we tell ourselves, and two, other people tell us as well, that get reinforced or don't.
I'm having a flashback to a time when I was given directions by somebody that had obviously lived a very long time in this area. So the landmarks they gave me and they referenced were relevant to their experience, but not necessarily to mine. Because the pub that they referenced was no longer called what they told me it was called. It was called something totally different. All of those sort of little things. That
gone from, say, like the King's Arms to the Slug and Lettuce.
Yes. So there's me looking for the King's Arms and I can't find it anyway because it's now the Slug and Lettuce.
Yeah.
But I think the other important takeaway for me is being careful about the use of language and whether or not we're attaching something to somebody because we don't have to. And we can navigate around something. We can explore an issue without it having to be owned by one or other person.
Well, you could always say what's that lighthouse telling you before you get dashed into the rocks?
Yeah. Or, like you and I do, is it just me, but I feel as though there's a bit of spikiness here?
Just
you. Are you experiencing it too? And if it is just me, then one or the other of us will go, well, what's making you, what evidence is there for that? What's leading to that thought process? Yeah. But it still places it in the middle of the room. It still puts it on the floor. It still doesn't attach to somebody.
And you can examine it from those other perspectives as well, rather than first person.
And what you get is you get a resolution. You get a solution without hurt feelings. You get a solution without discord. You get a solution without arguments. You just get an understanding. Really powerful stuff. So anchors can move.
Sheep and pigs can move as well.
Sheep and pigs can move, but aren't the best reference point. Stars move and navigate, and sometimes when we feel like we're not ourselves, it's maybe because we need to reorientate in the map and find different reference points, or check where our reference points are in relation to us. Yeah. Until next time.
Yes. Remember, please do like, share, follow, and subscribe. And again, if your organisation or you would like some help from us, or work with us in some capacity, our links are in the show notes.
Yeah. And if there's questions you've got, or you'd like to have a conversation with either Rich or I about anything that we've talked about today, then reach out. We're always happy to have that conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. And speak soon.
Yeah.